Hi, this is Lou, welcome to my channel, and welcome to a series of art tutorials all inspired by the beautiful and ancient city of Edinburgh. I've lived in Edinburgh for over 10 years now, and I'd like to take you with me to share some of my favourite locations and activities in the city through the medium of art. I hope that I can inspire you not just to draw and paint Edinburgh, but to take inspiration from where you live and where you visit, to capture the unique architecture and history of those places. So join me for the video today. We're going to be painting at one of the townhouses in the new town of Edinburgh. So let's get started. I've got some supplies here. I've got some watercolour paper that I'm going to be painting on. This is hot pressed paper, and this is the 9x12 inch pad, so it's bigger than I would normally work from. I decided to do some bigger works this series because I like the detail and I can get more detail in the bigger I paint. So I'm working quite large here, for me anyway. I've got water and a paper towel. I've got pencil and eraser. I'm going to do a sketch first. I've got a waterproof pen. This one happens to be a Unipin fine line pen, and this size is 0.4. I've got a couple of brushes. These are synthetic watercolour brushes. I've got a size 6 and a size 1 here. I think that's what I'm going to use. But if I decide to use any other brushes, I will let you know. And then I've got my little set of watercolour paints here. I will tell you in the description box which colours I've used, but the actual pigments aren't so important. I will try and let you know as I'm using them what colours I'm picking, but use whatever you've got. I've also got a little piece of scrap watercolour paper that I just used to test colours out on, so that's just over to the side there. And I think that's it. The only thing I need now is something to paint, so I've got my reference image here. I've got it up on my iPad, but I'm going to put it up in the corner of the screen so that you'll be able to see it at all times while I'm painting. So I want to get the proportions right first, so I can use the photo that I've taken to try and work that out. So I can use my pencil or a pen or something, put the edge of it up against the edge of this building here that I want to measure, and then I can use my finger here and just kind of measure the width across there. And then I can turn it round and see just how tall that makes it. So that kind of takes it from the bottom of the steps up to the kind of these windows here, and then so it's nearly 2, so to the top of the chimneys kind of comes to this bit of the pencil here, so it's kind of 1 and maybe 3/4 tall to wide. So I can transfer that onto the paper now. So transferring this onto my page, I can decide where on the page I want to make it. So I can put in a line for the bottom just with a pencil. Try and make it fairly straight. But if it's not exactly, it doesn't matter. And then I could use my exact measurements that I've taken from the photograph if I want to do it exactly the same size, but I think I want to make it a little bit bigger. So maybe make it that wide. But I can use that measurement to go, okay, vertically that takes it to there, and that would be a square. So I can put my line in here. I've lost my pencil. There we go. I think it might need a new lead. So that kind of gives me a square shape. And then what I want is kind of maybe 2/3, 3/4 of that again. So that would be to about up there, and that would take me to the tops of the chimneys. And then from there I can decide how is this sitting on the page, and it's maybe a bit tall and maybe a bit to the left, so I can move it over if I want to. So let's move it a little bit further over to the right so it's a bit more centered on the page, and let's bring it down by about that much. Then let's rub out the lines that I don't want so I don't confuse myself. And I think that's looking pretty good. And of course, if you're doing this on location, you can use the same method as well. You just hold your pencil at arm's length, and then the length of your arm is always the same, so then the proportion will always be the same. So you can use the same method for measuring buildings at a distance when you're actually out on location as well. So I've got my basic kind of rectangle of the building in here, and now I want to start breaking it down into its parts. And again, I'm just doing this roughly by dividing it into rectangles. So the building I can see has got kind of 4 columns and then 3 like windows in between those columns. So I could put in like a guideline for where each of those columns goes, like this. I may want to put like a guideline down the centre. That will help me to line up the centres of the doors and the windows. And then maybe there's a column here and a column here, like that. And then this line here is the line for a bottom of 3 shorter windows. So I could put those in first. So I've got a line for the bottoms of the windows. I can put in a line that goes all the way along the building for the tops of the windows, and then just verticals for how wide I think those windows are. And actually maybe they're a little wider. Maybe a little taller. So from that I can come down a little way, put in the next set of windows, which will be as wide as the ones above them, but they're a lot taller. Maybe there. At this stage I'm kind of guessing, and there's a little kind of triangular, is it called a pediment, above the window there. You can see that there's a line underneath the windows that runs along, and runs along the whole of the building. And then underneath that I've got some arched doorways. So let's put in my steps at the front. The doors themselves are as wide as the windows are, but the doorways are a little wider. And they're all the same height. So if they're all the same height, but I've not been very careful at drawing the arches looking the same, so I can go over those and neaten them up a bit. And I've managed to get the one in the middle bigger than the ones on the sides again. Above these windows are the tops of the columns, like this. And then there's some fancy stonework comes out. There are, the windows are the same width again, but they're actually quite short. There's a one on the right and a one on the left, but then the one in the centre is actually a half circle. Like that. That's not terribly neat, but I think you get the gist. There's another bit of fancy stonework that sticks out of there. And then there's, oops, I've lost the pencil. The chimney stack starts at the same line as this window ends. And goes across there. And then there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 chimneys on top. It's about the only thing on this building that's not perfectly symmetrical. So I'm just going to go through just checking the proportions of everything, making sure that I'm happy with the placement of these windows and how tall they are and everything like that. And I'm going to add another layer of detail with the sketch before I go in with the pen. So now I'm going to go in with the pen and start adding in the details and the curly bits and the little brackets and all of the details in the windows and yeah, the stuff that I just kind of get lost in. So you can do this in any order that you like. You can kind of go in and sketch out the outlines first and then go in and add more and more detail, or you can work on a small section at a time and just get all of those right. So I'm going to do mine in kind of 2 passes. So I'll go over once and I will get a fair amount of detail in, more than I've put in the sketch, but then I'll go over again and I'll add in kind of the extra special bits. And I'll decide as I'm going how much I'm going to put in, how much of the kind of fancy stonework am I going to do, like every stone, or am I going to do some light lines to indicate it, or am I not going to bother? I'll just see how it's looking and decide as I go. So I think I'm going to start in the centre of the building here and put in these pillars and then the windows in between them. I do like to start by finding a line somewhere in the stonework that goes all the way along. And some of them, like the tops of the pillars, they're kind of broken up a little bit because the pillars kind of stand out a little bit. But the line above it goes all the way across, so that's kind of where I'm starting and I'll work down from there. So on this side, this pillar here, I realised that I want it to stop about there, so not go right to the kind of bottom. So I've gone a little bit too far, but I'm just going to disguise it by doing my lines over the top of it like that. And if you look at any one of my individual lines, you'll see that they're a little bit wibbly and a bit wonky. But once I've done the whole thing, it'll kind of come together. You won't really notice it. But yeah, if it's something that bothers you, then use whatever means you want to sort that out. But I think I quite like the kind of the hand-drawn nature of it. And especially with a building like this where everything's so square and regimented, I think drawing it and putting a little bit of wobble in there is quite fun. And then along here, I've got another one of those lines that goes all the way across the building. So that's quite good, and that kind of defines that area. And now I can kind of go in and put the details of the windows in here. And now I've put this in, I'm looking at it and I can see there's actually a bit of a more of a gap between this pointy bit and then a window above it, but never mind. It'll be fine. Maybe the owners of the building would notice. Maybe the architect would. So I've got a fair bit of detail on this section now. I haven't put in the window details, so they're blank for the minute, and I've got to decide whether I'm putting in any of the lines for the stonework on here. I might do the bottom section because it's a little bit more pronounced on the bottom section, and then see whether this needs anything more when it's got the window details in. For now, I've got my pillars, I've got my kind of the mouldings around the windows, anything like that. So that's fine. And now I can move on and do another section. Now at the top of the chimney pot here, this is the place on the building where you can kind of see it receding into the distance. So if I put these lines like this, just on those little sticky out bits, it just looks like that's got kind of 3 dimensions. It's just a couple of little lines, but it does make a big difference. This house does have a slate roof on the top, and you can't really see it on the photo because you're so far down, but I think it would look good to kind of put it in. Put it in so it's kind of coming from just inside the building, because this the stonework on the front kind of sits up a little bit above it. I'm just gonna, this is a terraced house, so there's actually no join in the roof, but I'm going to assume that there is a kind of an imaginary line between the houses and put that in so that there's a kind of a definite line for the edge of the roof there. And the line at the top is kind of the ridge tiles. I made that line this side, could have been a little bit steeper, I think. And then I'll just put some light lines on there to kind of indicate slates on the roof. Now I need a little bit more space there. So just realised that I'd got another kind of row of stones in between the tops of the windows and the kind of the little balcony bits. So I just needed to kind of move those down a little bit. You could move the whole thing down if you think your doors are going to be too short. I think these are probably going to look okay. So, but I'll start drawing them in and see how they look. It's quite common on these houses to have little pots on the steps, so I think I might, and this one does have little pots on the steps, so I'm going to put some in. I'm going to make them a little bit more symmetrical than they are. This one's tricky because you can see that there's a pot there, but the railings are in the way. So should I put it in or not? I might leave those ones out and just have them on the middle steps. Artistic license. I'll have them on the middle steps and then not at the sides. But I need to decide that now because I need to put the pot would sit in front of the kind of the doorway here. So I need to make sure that if I want a little pot with a little bush in it, then I'll leave room for it. So I've got the basic outline in now, and I've left the spaces for the doors and windows. So now I'm going to go and fill all those in, and any of the details of the brickwork that I think it needs as well. So I have different ways of doing windows depending on the scale of what I'm drawing. If I'm drawing something big, I like to kind of draw in the window frame and leave white space for all of the mullions, which are the wooden bits in between all the window panes. So can start with the little line across the centre of the windows here. And most sash windows have this little bit that goes down on either side, and a lot of the times I'm doing them so small you couldn't see them. But on this one I think, you know, it's maybe big enough for that to be like important. And then how many divisions do my windows need? So they've got 2 vertical divisions like this, and then 1 horizontal one there and there. And you can put this in with pencil, or you can just kind of estimate where it is. And then I'm going to put in the inside panes of each of those windows. So I'll just draw a little rectangle for each one, making sure I left some space at the top and the side, and then a gap in between each pane. And this is a bit fiddly, but at this scale I think it does make a difference. And then on the bottom pane there's usually like a bigger gap at the bottom. So if I just leave a little bit more of a gap there, it looks a bit more realistic. And then quite often the top of the sash window comes over the kind of, yeah, the windows kind of overlap, so you wouldn't see the top of this bottom pane. So it looks like that. Sometimes when I'm drawing windows, I'll also include like the depth of the window recess, so that they kind of look like they're more set back. With this one, I'm gonna do that with watercolor, and I'm just gonna add a little bit of shading on there to give that impression. So this has a little semicircle at the bottom. It has a line kind of halfway up, and then it has 5 dividing lines on each side. I'm not sure I can quite fit in 5. Let's have another go at 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right. Okay, let's give that a go. Not sure this is going to look like the neatest half circle window ever, but, well, it's the first one. I'll do some more at the bottom, and we'll get better as we go along, I'm sure. Okay, it's like drawing little orange segments. If you struggle, you can always move to a smaller pen, or you can reduce the number of segments in it. So I was trying to be like accurate and make sure that there were 9, but if it's easier to make 7, then you could do 7 instead. Now the doors, I do want them to look like they're recessed a little bit, so if I draw a little frame around them, that might help. And then each of the doors has a little brass kick plate at the bottom. It has some nice panelling. I'm going to sketch in roughly where these panels are. What I think I want on this bottom bit is it's got some quite nicely carved stonework, and I'd like to kind of indicate that with some of the lines. So I'm going to sketch them in first. And then I can take my pen when I'm happy with the placement of them. Once you've finished your drawing, or you think you've finished, you can take your eraser and remove any of the pencil marks, and it'll just give you a sense of what the overall drawing looks like, and it makes it really obvious if you missed anything. So having surveyed this image a little bit, I've decided I do want a bit more detail up here, so I am going to put in some of the stone lines up here. I'm going to use a slightly thinner pen so they don't look as prominent as these ones down here, so this is a 0.2. Now for some colour, and I'm using my watercolours here, and I'm going to make a stone colour, and I'm going to use a mix of burnt umber. It's a little bit too reddy brown on its own, but if I mix in some blue, so some ultramarine blue, I can just neutralise that a little bit. And you can go from anywhere from this kind of brown right through to kind of pure blue. So what I've got is I've got a mix here that's more kind of reddy brown on this side, more bluey grey on this side, and then somewhere in the middle. I can add a little bit more colour into there. And I can just take my brush and dip it into different parts of this, and that'll give me a kind of a mix of different tones. So I don't want to paint the whole thing in one tone because it's an old building and it's got some mucky bits, and you know, the light falls on it slightly differently in different places. So I'm just going to kind of mix that up. So I've got some brownier parts and some kind of stonier, slatier kind of grey parts. I'm going to use a fair bit of water with this because it's not that dark of a building. So let's just start at the top and work our way down. I'm just going to fill in all of the stonework, and right from the top down to these steps down here, I'm going to leave the windows and the doors, and then yeah, pretty much everything else is stone. Oh, I'll do the roof separately as well. So that's a bit brownier there, and then this one has a bit. This bit has got a bit more blue in it, like that. And I'm going to be quite careful and paint around the windows. Of course, how you apply the colour is entirely up to you, and you may choose to do a kind of a more loose application of colour where you don't worry too much about where the edges are. And as I'm going, I'm trying to keep like a wet edge so that I don't get any harsh lines as it dries. So yeah, see, this bit's dried up here. So I've painted this bit next to it, and I've got a bit of a solid line there. So what I can do is I can just take that back either up to a line where it makes sense, or to a part of the paint where it's still wet, and it'll blend nicely. And now down to the steps. I'm just going to put a wash of this colour all over the steps, but kind of fade it out as we get down to the bottom, just by adding a little bit more water into that. Maybe a little bit on the street like that. I'll use the same mix to do the chimneys. Just vary them a bit. So a little bit redder. And then the same concept for the roof, but this time I'm using a lot more of the ultramarine. So I've got much more of a grey, a bluey grey there, and I'm just going to do the roof tiles up here. gone over this line a little bit, tiny bit, so I'm just going to use my paper towel, just tidy that up a little bit. So then I'm going to fill in all of the windows, and I'm using exactly the same mix of colours as I've just painted the roof, but this time I'm making sure that they're a little bit stronger, so there's a bit more pigment to water. And that should give me a nice dark kind of colour there for the depths of the rooms where you can just see black inside. I'm going to switch to a smaller brush to paint these, and I'm just going to paint in the window panes. Now you can do all of them the same, and it just looks like there's, it just looks like you're kind of seeing into the dark room. Some of these rooms have got curtains and shutters and things like that, and you get slightly lighter colour in the window. Sometimes when you look at a building you can see the reflections and you have a choice whether you can paint those as well. They're a little bit harder to do, so we're going to paint into the rooms. So we're going to do some of the windows completely dark like these, some of them a little bit lighter so it looks like there's a shutter kind of behind it, and yeah, just going to go around and fill in all of these little rectangles that I've painted. So I've painted in all of the dark windows here, and I've left some lighter, and these are the ones where you can see shutters behind, and I'm going to use exactly the same colour, maybe a little bluer, but with a lot more water for those, because even though the shutters are white, they're still behind glass, they're still like recessed a little bit, so you will get just a little bit of shadow, and I think that's maybe even a bit too much. So I can blot it a little bit and add a bit more water in to my mix. Let's try again, that's a bit better. So you can see some difference between the window frame and the window pane, but there's definitely a lighter bit there. Now it would be possible to do this whole painting just with those two colours, but I want to add a little bit of colour onto the doors. Now the doors in the photo are all black, but I thought it'd be good fun to do some colour. So I think you can pick whatever colours you like, and I also want to do the greens of the little flowers in the flower pot. So I'm going to start with some yellow, and this yellow is called Aureolin, but any yellow will do really. Add a tiny bit of the blue to it. I'll get myself a nice bright limey green and just dab that in over those bushes. So I can pick the whole thing in with the green and then give it a little bit more shadow by mixing a little darker green with a bit more of the blue and just dotting that in a few places. And then the doors. Now there's been a story in the local news recently about somebody in the new town who painted their door pink and then got a letter from the council saying it wasn't an appropriate colour for the new town, and she had to change it back. And then she pointed out that in their brochure about what colours are appropriate to paint their doors in the new town was a picture of a door painted pink. So I'm not quite sure where that one's gone, but I thought I might do a pink door in honour of that story. So this is Permanent Rose, and it is a nice bright pink. And I'm going to do the centre door in this colour, and then I'll decide what to do with the other doors. Oh yeah, that's good. going to try and leave the letterbox and the kick plate at the bottom of the door so I can paint them a slightly different colour. And that is a good pink, but I think it needs a little bit more intensity, so I'm just going to dot a little bit more colour in there, allow it to blend out. And then I think the doors on either side need to be, I don't know, maybe a little bit of a more muted normal Newtown colour. I've no idea what colour to do. I could mix these greens together, actually. Maybe make a dark grey green. And the green's a nice complement to the pink. And then the one on the other side, what about like a dark blue? So this is one layer over everything, and everything's coloured now, apart from the window frames, but that's okay because I want them to be white. All I want to do now is to give this a little bit more dimension because it looks a little bit flat. So I just want to put in some shadows where the bits of stone are overhanging, so you'd see a shadow underneath it. And each of the windows is a little bit recessed, so that will have a shadow too. So again, I can use this grey browny colour here as a shadow. Just mix all of that in together. Maybe a little bit more blue in there. And I can just start putting in a line with my small brush underneath anything that sticks out. So starting at the top, I can use it underneath this kind of parapet thing. Don't know what to call these bits. So there, and there's a littler one there. And I'm just going to keep going and adding those lines. So yeah, so underneath each window at the top, there'll be a line across. And I've gone outside the window there. I can just shoot that back. So there and there. And you'll be amazed what difference that makes. You can also put a line down one side as well if the shadow is more angled, but make sure that if you do that, you do the same on each window at each side. And things like where these pillars stick out, there'll be a line down there as well. Like that. Just make sure that you put that on the right side each time. For these arches, the shadow curves from the left underneath and then kind of fades out. And then it would go down the left-hand side of the door there. It's a bit much on that one. And just blot it. Take it down a little bit. Maybe add in some water. And then I can put in shadow lines underneath here and here as well. So I can put them on the door frames, on the doors, anywhere that's recessed. And the more recessed it is, the thicker and darker the line is. So these are just recessed a little way, so I'm just trying to do a very thin line there. And you can, if you want to, do some shadows on the door panels too. other bit that needs shadows are the steps. So the top of the step will be lighter than the face of the step, so we can draw a slightly darker line along the edge of each step there. I think that's it for this painting. So what I'm going to do is I will put my reference photo on my website, and there'll be a link for that down below. And if you have a go at this, I'd love to see your version of it. I'd love to see what you do differently. How would you attack it? Do you prefer a loose style or a kind of a more tight, contained style? However you approach this, it'll look different from mine, because we'll kind of have an innate different style that comes out when we try and do something like this, but also we'll make different choices as we go along. So I'd love to see what you do with this reference material, and I look forward to seeing your new town buildings. So next week's video I'm actually doing as a live stream, and I'm going to be doing that next Saturday, and I'll be posting a link to that, which you should see if you're subscribed to my channel. And yeah, I'll look forward to seeing you in that. I've really kind of missed doing the live streams. I started doing a few last year, but last autumn I really wanted to focus on kind of getting a season out. So I didn't want to kind of break that, and I didn't want to break the cycle at all. But I really missed doing the live streams, so I've incorporated a couple into this season. I really hope that you're going to enjoy them. And we're going to be doing Building in Perspective next week. So hopefully I'll see you then. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.